Welcome back to the Gary Sutton Show on WSBA. And, remember when we had the hostages in Iran that were taken and we tied the yellow ribbon around the oak tree, so to speak, to remind us of those people every single day? 444 hostages, if memory serves me correctly, or 444 days, I guess it was. But there's that kind of project going on right now, the Yellow Ribbon Project. And I was intrigued the other day by some articles that Bridget Johnson has written about this. She's a career journalist whose news articles and opinion columns have run in dozens of news outlets across the country. She's contributed to USA Today, the Wall Street Journal, National Review Online, Politico, and more. Has a myriad of television and radio credits as a commentator. She is the Washington editor of PJ Media, and she is with us finally here on the Gary Sutton Show this morning. And I say finally because I owe her a big apology, and I want to do it on the air the correct way. Bridget, good morning to you.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
And I want to apologize because, unfortunately, we have this little spam thing that picks up confirmations when they come back. And this is the first time that I've ever had confirmations picked off 3 different times that have come back from the publicist. And so we apologize. We were supposed to have you at 10:35 this morning, but we like to, wear our hearts on our sleeves here, and I hope you'll accept my apology.
Not a problem. Glad that you're helping feature this important project.
Well, it is an important project. And, one of the things you wanted to talk about, I know this morning, is this Yellow Ribbon Project. And we forget sometimes there are still people who have been left behind right now. Tell us a little bit about some of the people. I know there's one particular person in Iran right now who you're thinking about.
Yeah, I opened this project with the story of Amir Hekmati. He's born in Flagstaff, grew up in Michigan, served in the Marines, served in Iraq, and he went over to visit his relatives in Iran. His parents are from Iran, for the very first time in 2011. And he was almost done with his trip, and he had done everything correctly with his visa to get into the country. He said that he was a former Marine, etc. And not too long before he was supposed to go home, he didn't show up for a family gathering. They went over to his cousin's apartment where he'd been staying, and it had been broken into, and there was signs of a scuffle everywhere. For many days, the family couldn't even find him. They didn't know where he was. Police were not saying anything. And then it turns out that he was thrown into this notorious Evin prison for political prisoners. And he is closing in on 1,000 days of captivity, so he's been there more than twice as long as the 1979 hostages. He was originally sentenced to death. They were claiming that he was conspiring to commit espionage or planning to commit espionage. That has been changed to 10 years in prison. And this family is just beside themselves because they cannot get him proper legal representation. He's being tried behind closed doors in these kangaroo courts over there. And Iran claims that since his father is Iranian and therefore that gives someone immediate Iranian citizenship wherever they are, that he can't be an American, even though he was born in Flagstaff, Arizona. I talked extensively with his sister. They are proud Americans, American to the core. She said, we are just a normal Midwestern family, and this has happened to us. And the only way they even found out that he was sentenced to death was reading it in the Iranian news sites. And so for a month or a couple months, she said that, imagine waking up every single day and not knowing if they've executed your brother.
Bridget, where is his name on legislation out there? I haven't seen any legislation with Mr. Mahdi's name on anywhere.
It's because there is none, and that's one of the reasons why I latched onto this story as well. Is we've got 3 people in Iran right now. We've got Pastor Saeed Abedini from Idaho. We've got Bob Levinson, who has been missing for more than 6 years in Iran and is believed to be held because we've got regular photos that are leaked out to the family of him.
I'm looking at one that says 4th year you can't or you don't want. Yeah.
But Amir's case has just not gotten the same attention up on the Hill. He's not mentioned on any legislation. I did talk with his his family's congressman, Rep. Dan Kildee from Michigan. And, he's gotten, the lawmakers to sign a call for his release. And he asked Obama to talk about Amir at the State of the Union, which the White House did not do. And they told him that, they didn't want to basically wrinkle feathers, with Iran.
Wow.
By bringing that up there. But the family is hoping, trying to be optimistic that, that some sort of new détente with Iran would help bring him home. But, I'm told, privately off the record with, several officials that that's kind of slim hope.
Do you feel like this is a lonely battle right now for you? Or are you feeling, are people coming to you and wanting to know more about this in terms of the Yellow Ribbon Project and cases like Mr. Hekmati?
It's something where I get a lot of, I didn't know about that. I didn't know about him. And that, the reason why I started this is, I'd been off and on covering a lot of these cases over the years. For example, the case of Austin Tice, who's another former Marine, and he's missing in Syria and believed to be held by Bashar Assad. And the number one problem that these families have is keeping their loved ones in the headlines, or getting them in the headlines in the first place. It usually only comes with a news hook. For example, if North Korea does something crazy or Dennis Rodman goes over there,
right,
then Kenneth Bay, ends up in the headlines. They're also stuck in this weird point of, will we anger the captors if we go out and we seek publicity? And so they're trying to strike this balance. But one of the really inspiring things about Amir's case is I met another former Marine who served in Desert Storm and Desert Shield.
This Sergeant Mahoney?
Terry Mahoney. He does not know Amir. He does not know his family. He's from Maryland, not Michigan. And he was inspired to just hand draw a sign and go out and stand in front of the White House and say, hey, we have a Marine over there. He's being held by Iran. He didn't do what they're accusing him of. We need to bring our American home. And he told me that when he has other Marines come by and stop, they're like, yeah, let's go get him out of there.
Yeah.
But the response from a lot of people is, I just didn't know that.
When his schedule allows, he actually goes to the White House, stands on the sidewalk with his sign for an hour, because he told, as he told your group, PGM, Amir is his brother in a vow, semper fidelis. He said, I wish I had more resources to do more. We'll do what we can. But he said he feels it's a fraternal bond of service that you write here in your blog. And, it's amazing to me that our government isn't more demanding. And I realize these are tricky situations, trying to get people out of there, on trumped-up charges most of the time, or maybe even all the time in this particular case, who knows. But point being, you don't hear the noise about this. You just don't. When we had the hostages in Iran, we're counting every day. We had yellow ribbons in Washington to remind us every day. Where are those yellow ribbons now for individuals, because their lives are every bit as important? Right.
And it's really frustrating because you kind of hear on the face from the families, thank you, to the administration for helping us through this. But then privately you hear that we don't have a liaison, we need to, get just any sort of information about what's happening. We don't know, where he might be in negotiations. And one of the things that I heard from Austin Tice's family was they just had problems even getting somebody from the State Department on the phone. And there are fortunately not so many Americans being held, abroad at this point, that liaisons cannot be dedicated to these families. And that there can't be some sort of constant outreach going on. But it's very, very difficult situations that they find themselves in. And a piece I'll be coming out with today, focusing on Warren Weinstein, our only al-Qaeda hostage at the moment, a U.S. aid worker who was in Pakistan when he was kidnapped in 2011. His congressman was telling me that it's very frustrating because he's in the hands of the most brutal terrorist organization on the planet, but we don't negotiate with terrorists.
Wow.
So how are we going to get him back?
Then you have the case you mentioned earlier, Alan Gross, who has been kept in Cuba since December of 2009. And his family has warned that he may not live to see his next birthday under the Castro regime. You write in your piece here. It was his 65th birthday this year. But he remains in a Cuban prison. Now, I understand he was there to work on a project to increase internet access and connectivity at Cuban synagogues when he was seized the night before he was to return home. Mm-hmm. And he spent, 14 months behind bars before any charges were even filed?
Right. He was working for USAID, so he was working as a U.S. subcontractor there. And he was sentenced to 15 years in prison. He's tried to draw attention to his case with a recent 9-day hunger strike. Obviously, where he's staying in prison there is not conducive to health to begin with. Robert Menendez has found out that he's been being kept in Villa Marista, a prison notorious for its treatment of political prisoners by the Cuban National Security Agency. It's not some sort of minimum security prison where he's getting good treatment. It's the worst of the worst there. In
the case of Gross, I saw that he was eventually convicted of, quote, acts against the independence or territorial integrity of the state, unquote.
In other words, trumped up charges so they can hold an American.
Yeah, distributing cell phones and other communications equipment as part of the USAID project. Doesn't sound that nefarious from here.
No, what it was is he was installing these lines, and then to test them out, he gave some laptops and cell phones and different things to people in the community so that they could test that they were working.
And yet we're working on normalizing relations with Cuba here somewhere down the line. When does his name come up in terms of normalizing relations?
Exactly. And you have, the Cubans in Congress, Menendez, Marco Rubio, Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, they are really harping on Alan Gross's case and saying that, you cannot start normalizing relations with this regime, while they do this to our people.
One of the people that we did not really mention, Sergeant Bo Bergdahl, and again, a guy who was taken prisoner in Afghanistan back in 2009. There's actually a petition out there regarding him, right?
There is, yeah. That's a very difficult case, being held by the Taliban. Some commentators have put out pieces of, they're not sure if he was, why he wandered off base, or if he was taken, voluntarily. I reached out to his family recently, and they're very hesitant to talk on the record at this point. But we do have some other former Marines in Congress, like Duncan Hunter Jr. I just got a bunch of letters that he's been sending to Chuck Hagel to find out exactly what their strategy is to even try and get him back. So that's a really difficult case.
We're talking to Bridget Johnson, who's the head of the Yellow Ribbon Project. Bridget, what can we do? I mean, what can the average person listening to this right now do to help out there with this?
Well, when I was talking to Rep. John Delaney, Democrat from Maryland, about Warren Weinstein the other day, and I asked him that question, and he did give the answer that I guess would apply most uniformly to everybody is he said, pray. I said, I believe in the power of prayer. Beyond that, the public can really help in raising the profile of these cases. If we've seen what's happened with people finally learning about Boko Haram from people using the Bring Back Our Girls hashtag, from people learning about the Lord's Resistance Army by the Kony 2012 hashtag and video that was hugely popular a couple years ago. There needs to be that sort of grassroots concern. People like Terry Mahoney standing outside the White House. There needs to be pressure on legislators. There needs to be pressure on the White House. There needs to be support for legislators who have picked up these cases and are trying to get support for them, and are trying to get publicity. And that there needs to be also support for the families and a demand that our foreign policy is not going to basically open our people up to this kind of, being able to be held with impunity.
Right. And, of course, for more information, then go to pjmedia.com/Yellow Ribbon Project/author/Bridget Johnson, which also will update you and give you information about each of these kinds of cases. It's unbelievable when you read through this thing. Bridget, I am in your debt this morning. Again, I hope you'll accept my apology for our screw-up and understand the reason why. But you have been a font of information on this morning, and it's one that needs to be put out there.
Thank you so much for putting it out there.
Bridget, I appreciate it. We'll talk again soon. Thank you so much. Take care. Bridget Johnson with PJ Media this morning. Boy, a sobering kind of thing when you know the people that are around the world right now being kept against their will, usually on trumped-up charges. We'll come back with some final thoughts here on the Gary Sutton Show on News Radio 910 WSBA.